Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the first episode of Motivation the Nat. My name is Natalie. I'm your host. And as you can see today, I get to be joined by my awesome other half, Josh. And we're going to be talking about a very timely, I think, topic happening in our lives right now, but it's also something that we get a chance to look back on and determine kind of what we learned in our past experiences and how we're applying it now. And then I think we're probably going to have a great check in a few months to see how well we actually did with some of it. So, the topic is career changes, and not only on how they impact you, but how they impact those around you and your family units and your social units, and what maybe being able to reflect on has made us grow into as we've gotten further along in our lives and as we've gotten into new relationships, because it's not just us changing, but it's kind of our entire environment shifting and changing. So I think it's going to be a really great conversation, and we get to know a little bit about Josh in the process, and really just overall, it's going to be a learning experience because it's our very first podcast episode. So probably a little bit clunky while we go. You'll hear us slurping our coffees that we've got with us, and we hope that too that some of this resonates with everyone. So if when you're done listening today, however far along you get, let us know what nuggets you're taking away from the conversation. Also, going to direct you to a few resources that we're going to walk through. One being from the Northeastern University, an article by Shayna Joubert that's going to be about what are signs that it's time for you to switch your careers up. And then also one from Carrie Kirpin on how to navigate this conversation with your loved ones. And we're going to reflect on that ourselves as we go. So,
Yes, we are.
all right. Well, let's just set the tone a little bit with us so people kind of know where we're coming from when we have this conversation, right? You and I have been together for a little over 2 years. And yes, we are married because I don't do anything slow. And I think when you're in your late 30s, you know, right? Did you really just look at your wedding ring as a reminder that, yeah, I am actually hitched to this
I
girl?
had to show them the proof, you know?
So, but the whole time that we've been together, whether it was dating, living together, engaged, married now, we've had the same job, each of us. So, I've been with the federal government for 2 years of that whole time. Well, I've been with them for 7.5 years, but the 2 years we've been together, I've been with them. Different kind of roles and responsibilities, but same general place. And you have been with a for profit?
For-profit organization, yes. Yes, I have. And
Okay.
I've been there 3 years now? Yeah. Yeah, 3 years.
And doing the same general role, right? So, again,
Mm-hmm.
new responsibilities, but same premise.
Same premise, yep.
And we were both work from home
Both work from home, yep.
and both travel with work.
Occasionally, yeah.
Yeah, more than we probably both expected kind of coming into things, but
More than we both want.
yeah. So over those 2 years, I mean, there was a point where you and I were on the road every other week, kind of
Mm-hmm.
alternating. So you'd be gone, then I'd be gone, then you'd be gone. And, that was its own unique stressor. But I think we found a new rhythm with that, and that kind of lessened the impact over time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd never, I mean, prior to us, I've never been in a relationship where either one of us traveled for work. I mean, very, very occasionally, like maybe once, maybe twice a year. But I mean, this one on a busy season, it's every other week. You on a busy season, you were every other week, sometimes 2 weeks in a row. It took some getting used to, that's for sure. Um, you just always you want to be home way more often. You want to make your trips as short as possible, just to get home, just to see your partner, me seeing you, obviously. um, and you appreciate that time more, I think. Yeah.
So in when we started seeing each other, and you kind of, I guess probably when I was first around a lot more, and you got to see what my work was like. What were some of the first thoughts that came to your mind? Were you already like, she's a little overly committed, or I don't know how long this is going to last, or like what were some of those reflections of
I
that
mean,
dynamic?
yeah, yeah, no. I mean, I mean, the first thing I thought, I was like, wow, she must be pretty important. um, but I saw very quickly that, you were the type of person that dove into work head first. And, a lot of times at the end of the day, you'd come out with, you know, some scrapes and bruises on, essentially, metaphorically speaking, obviously, but we'll say psychologically. um,
No, the theme of the episode was how stable am I?
that
So
is true. That is true. No, but no, it was very apparent that, it took a toll on you. And I learned that, and not just from that one occupation, but that no matter what you're doing, whether it be work, whether it be a hobby, whether it be something that you just genuinely care about, um, you're gonna dive into head first, and you're gonna give it your all. And maybe that's a trait that we both share from a ADD perspective.
which is a formal diagnosis. So, I mean, we're not just throwing that out there. I definitely see someone to help with that. But I think that was interesting for me because before we got together, I remember my therapist telling me that she thought I needed to take short-term disability because I was so burnt out. That was before I was even, considering moving or doing any of the wildlife things that, we've done together. And I just kept telling her, no, oh my God, are you serious? Why would I do that?
That's
And
unheard of.
but it also
Our
because I
generation
was
doesn't know that.
right, but because I was single at that point, like it wasn't as big of a deal for me. And even when I was dating someone before that, I felt very single in many ways. So I didn't mind diving into the work. I didn't feel like I was missing out. I wasn't worried about who I was sharing my time with. My friends came to me. I was really spoiled with that. And then you came into the picture. And I think that's one of the threads I think that we'll probably pull out of this is that when your environment changes, it changes your perspective on a lot of other things. And so I think it's important, especially when we get into this first kind of topic of the six signs that it might be time to change a career. It's not always that you're feeling that way because the organization has made you feel that way or your leadership has made you feel that way. It may be because you're changing, you're going through life changes. And so as you know, look back on this first kind of component at your experiences in the past and when you felt the way you did about the job that you had for a long time before where you're at now, I think maybe that's also a piece because you left a relationship, ended up single, and so even those pressures and variables kind of coming into play. So all that just to say that it's not one thing that I think makes us start to have these thoughts or need to have these conversations. It's a whole inner dynamic of a lot of moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they speed us up in that process, and sometimes they may actually slow us down or make us more resistant along the way.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how I think resilient we can be. I think that's and in the face of everything you just mentioned, I thought it was actually it's funny. That's I feel like we've talked about it before, but I feel like it's also one of the first times I've heard you mention, you're in a career and you start to feel like this isn't for me anymore. This isn't, it stresses me out. I go home every day and I don't want to, get up and go to work the next day. I'd rather just stay home. But like I said, it feels like one of the first times I've heard you mention, you are changing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, Yeah, I never really thought about it a whole lot that way. I think it's really easy to outwardly, blame the job, the role, whatever. But I think you and I both can comfortably say that it's probably a combination of both, especially when you're somewhere for 7 years, like you've been, or which I give you a lot of credit for, a lot of respect for, because I mean that's a long. I mean, in my opinion, that's a long time to be in one place. Even if you are changing roles, getting promotions, transferring, whatever that may be, I mean, that's still a long time. I mean, I don't think I've ever been anywhere that long. I get very disinterested fast when it comes to work. Fortunately, in my current role, I really enjoy it. I like being there, but I mean, geez, that took 37 years to find. So um, I think that in reflecting back at the one role in particular that I felt the way you mentioned, where I felt burnout, I felt stressed. I even at times, like, it excelled into, no, well, excel is not the right word, but it progressed into like depression and not knowing, thinking I made the wrong choices for my life, thinking did I go to college for the right thing? Did I, questioning myself. So, um, fortunately, circumstances came the way they did, and I was able to change roles. Um, the next role wasn't really the my favorite either, so that one didn't last very long. But I think all those things are just, as cliche as it may sound, stepping stones to get to the one place you'll be really happy.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, it's been an experience. So.
Well, let's get into the experience and let's talk about. You touched on a bunch of those kind of six elements from the article I was going to reflect on, but the last 6 months have most definitely been the most intense of all of this. So, we got married last October, we get through the holidays, and early January, I took on a additional role. I wouldn't say it's a new one, it was an addition. My boss took a temporary kind of assignment and I slid into her job, but I still had my whole job that I had previously. Massive increase in responsibilities. And I'm going to put this kind of gently, but we were in the midst of a presidential transition. And anytime that happens, the federal government loses their identity for a little bit, as far as I'm concerned, where you're in this gray space of you're not really sure what's happening, where we're going, what direction. And this go round, it was on steroids. And so it became really clear, I think, from end of January on that this was not going to be normal. And I remember, and I'm sad now looking back at it, where I told my friends, I told you, I said, we just got to get through it. You're probably not going to see me for 4.5 months, maybe up to 6.
I remember that. Yeah.
But we just got to get through it. It's going to be worth it in the long run. And I had every intention of seeing this kind of temporary assignment through and then going back to my gig, recovering a little bit and moving on with what I always did. But I think what became very obvious a few months in was there was going to be no going back. And that I didn't even know what would be available to kind of reinvest in, and could we ever get to a point where we wouldn't be managing a lot of chaos. So I think our conversations probably started in late April, early May, when the deferred resignation program for the federal government at our agency was going to be reoffered again. So they had done around in February. I was like, nah, I'm not going to do this. Like, that's stupid. I don't trust it. And then the second round came up, and I think by that point I was so broken that I didn't trust myself to make an informed decision of should I do this or not. And I think we had more than I can count late night discussions about happiness, about fear, about what would this mean, how would it look. And we won't get into all the details on the program, but what it does, and spoiler, I took it. So June 30th was my last day in the office, and now I'm on what I would consider to be a paid sabbatical. So, until September 30th, I'm still on the books and on a, basically getting severance in some nature from the agency, and think what you want about that process to anyone listening. But it very much is something that I think, one, for most who took it, very earned in a lot of ways, and has been its own emotional roller coaster associated with it. So it's not just like, oh yeah, I'm cashing a check, like this is great. So but during those discussions, I think we touched on all of these six elements. And they start, again, this is from a Northeastern University article by Shana Joubert. Hopefully, I'm saying her name right. And it's funny because the very first one on the list is the only one. And I almost didn't read further because I was like, well, I don't have that. And as I read further, I realized the fact that I didn't have the first one of the six was what was making me so burnout and so morally destroyed during the whole decision process. And so that one was that you're apathetic and complacent. And so I just don't care. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do my check boxes, I'm going to do my work, and I'm going to go home at the end of the day, and I'm not going to think about it again until I have to get up and in there and go tomorrow. And that's where I think we have very different experiences in regards to probably how you felt when you left your previous jobs and how I felt trying to leave this one, because we've talked about this a lot, I'm so tied to the mission of where I work. So no matter what that mission is, it had to be one that spoke to me. It had to mean something to me. It had to be tied to my history, to my life. And so I could never let it down or, feel like I was. And you don't have that problem.
No, no. I mean, well, it's funny because it's almost the opposite. And as you were talking, or as you were talking about it, I kind of I thought a little bit more about it, and I mean, I when I went to college, when I went to school, like I mean, I never knew what I wanted to do. I never, I was undecided for so long, um, and
eight
then
year
eventually,
senior.
huh?
8 year senior.
Yeah, we'll say seven. We'll say seven. Maybe 7.5. Or 8. Yeah, we'll go with 8. But yes, long time. Took me forever to figure out what I wanted to do. And at the end of it, like I still never picked something that I had a passion or a drive for. I mean, at that point, I was late 20s. I think I was 26, 27. Um, and I said, you know what, I have to pick something. I gotta get out there. I gotta start building my life, making money. And so just in talking to people, at work, in class, you know, they're like, oh, this subject pays well. It's in demand, and it's you always have a job no matter where you go. And I was like, you know what, that's what I'm gonna do. So I did that, and I got out. Every single job I had related to that field, I never really felt a drive for the goal of that department, that support role. I did. I always, at least at first, I always felt motivated to perform well and achieve things and complete tasks, but I never really had the passion for the role itself. Like, I mean, I guess a good way to put it is like, I mean, we could mention adopting cats real quick. If you work in like an animal shelter, or you work, that you have a passion for saving, saving those animals, saving them. You don't just want to go to work and you're like, oh, I'm so happy I got this done. I cleaned the kennels, whatever it may be. Um, you have had that passion. Um, I guess that's a key word, had. Um, you probably still do. I just don't think that you had the right environment to be able to achieve what you wanted successfully. Um, so I have noticed that even though I may not have the passion or the drive for for the subject matter, at hand, whatever it is, whatever role that may be, or whatever that role is trying to accomplish. Um, I have noticed that culture and environment, you mentioned environment, that's a huge thing for me. So if I'm at a job and I it's a bad culture. It's a toxic culture. There's zero support. Everybody's angry, upset. Everybody's out to get everyone else all the time. So that plus not already not having a drive or passion for the role is a miserable experience. So like in my current role, for example, it's a perfect example of the opposite where it works for me in a positive way. So it's a great culture. There's great people, and it's just there's virtually no toxicity, and it makes it both the people and the environment, the culture there makes it easy to do your job, makes it easy to get done what you need or want to do. And it helps actually drive my passion that I did not have more. So I think for me, I need both of those things. For you, you had, at least from what I could see from an outside perspective, you had that passion, you had that drive, you wanted to help, as much as you could. You wanted to, and that's what you wanted. You wanted to help people as much as you could at the end of the day. But your environment or the culture that you were in did not allow you to be set up for success. It made you miserable. It made you stressed out. And I think it's like a cascade effect. I mean, just like mine was a toxic culture, even made my drive even lower. Yours having a toxic or hurdle of a culture, um, both, you know, it made you not want to be there, but it also took away your passion a little bit. It chipped away at it. It wore it down, and it burnt you out. And I think it made you. I think we actually talked about it one time. I think you had actually mentioned, and I know I've asked myself this before in roles that I felt burnout in. But you ask yourself, what am I even here for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I came here. If it's a job that you're helping people, you were hired to help people, and the culture or environment is not allowing you to help people. It's become this whole other thing. Like it's when I first started at any role, I guess. I mean, well, most of them, we'll say
Mm-hmm.
that. You know, I was always a worker. Like I didn't go to school and get amazing grades. I wasn't a genius or anything, and so I knew that I had to show, or I had to put my work ethic in to perform well. Um, so that being said, like any role I would start, I never really had much doubt that I would succeed, and I did well. I would do well. Those that first year, for 2 years, whatever it may be, and then eventually when whether it's an already existing toxic culture or environment, or it's something that with changing of the organization, changing of roles, people leaving, people coming in, that creates a bad environment, bad culture. Um, I tell you what, the drive, the the work ethic there declined pretty rapidly, and I started asking myself, what am I even here for? And when you ask yourself what you're even here for, I mean that takes away your whole sense of purpose, leading to burnout and depression.
Well, and that's the perfect description of being apathetic and complacent is why am I even here? And I think, what's interesting is, in the federal government, you're kind of put into a place where, let's be honest, that your board of directors is Congress, and I don't know if there's anything more toxic than kind of the debate of two parties kind of clashing constantly, and then you're the kid just trying to do your job. And so even though my insulated group had a really good culture, and even though some of the spider web components that went out from there, it's still the product of a bigger issue, and the bigger issue being what was really just expounded in the last 6 months. So and what you tapped into is the next one, which is that you don't feel like you're making an impact. So that's the conflict between, if you actually care and you want to go in and you're trying every single day, and you continue to just run into brick wall after brick wall after brick wall, then you have this kind of moral just fragmentation of, you feel like you cannot give up, yet you cannot kind of win anything. And then you end up in what I think is a very toxic reinforcement, which is, then there's that one thing. that someone heard you finally, or that you were able to influence, and because it's been impossible for the last however long, you hang on to that one win. And then you're like, there's still hope. It could still get better. I told you so. And yeah, now here's where we're at. Let me fix it. And I think that's what I got stuck in, was that there was one of my biggest things, and you've heard me tell mentees this, is you have to be consistent, and you cannot stray from something that you know to be right, or that you believe in, or that is proven to be the right course, and eventually people will listen to you. Well, it just becomes really hard over time, and I had to, I think, be battled with my own kind of advice from that perspective. Here I was being consistent, 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 knowing it was going to make a change, and yet no one would let it. And so I definitely felt like I couldn't have an impact anymore. And it was hard because I would speak up, and off to the side where no one could see, I would get messages and emails and texts, and they'd say, keep doing what you're doing. Someone needs to say it. Or you're saying the things no one, really wants to bring up or mention. And so it was also really hard to watch other people who I knew cared majorly about everything that was going on feel like they couldn't or didn't know how to message that in a way that would make sense. So then I just felt like I was taking on a lot of that responsibility of being the weird naysaying voice in the room. And that was a lot of pressure too, I think. And I wasn't ready for it. So you mentioned this one earlier, which is you dread going to work. And I think in a world where you work from home, people really struggle with being like, what do you mean you dread going to work? You roll out of bed, you slide down your stairs, and you stumble over to your computer and you hit the power. But it's still really tough. And sometimes I think it was even harder because you feel like you never leave work when you work from home. And so, I mean, I know your job that you were referencing earlier that you left was an in person job. You were there, and, now you are in a remote position. But do you see the dynamic of kind of how you start your days or how you end your days being a little different now than they did previously when you were commuting?
I mean, yeah. I mean, physically. I mean, there's definitely a difference. Let's state the obvious first. You got to get up probably way earlier, which I'm not a morning person. I don't like to get up early. You know that. Wakes me up at like 5 a.m. So that, I mean, honestly, I mean, getting up, having to get up early just to, who knows? It might be winter. Clean your car off, hop in the car, commute to work. Then you finally get to work. You're still half asleep. You may or may have not had your coffee on the way to work. You get to work. You probably get something thrown on your desk or thrown in your face saying, "Oh, this needs done today." Um, but and then who knows? You might be walking into that toxic culture again. But at least from home, um, you can be a little bit more comfortable. At home, I mean, I still wake up early. Um, you know, I don't dread going to work now. I think that I think the biggest difference, and I think a lot of people, when you talk about working from home, to people that have to get up and go to work like 9 to 5, whatever, and you might tell them about something difficult or something stressful that happened, and they're like, "Oh, you work from home? What do you mean? You're fine. You're remote." But at the same time, like whether you have to get up and hop in your car and drive to work, walk to work, ride your bike to work, whatever it may be, um, we are all still spending 8, 10, 12, 16 hours doing something. That's a lot of your day and a lot of your life. And whether you're at home working remotely or you're somewhere else, you're both still spending the same amount of time doing something you either love, you're content with, um, you just deal with, or you absolutely hate. So, I mean, I think no matter if you're at home or if you have to get up and go somewhere, I mean, I still think that's a majority of time spent. And I would rather, whether I have to leave my house or whether I'm staying at home, I'd rather it be something that I hopefully enjoy. Um, because I think that even if I do have to go, like let's say for example someday I have to, I take on another job where I have to leave the house. Um, it's I'm not gonna hate, or I'm not gonna dread that as much. I'm not gonna dread getting up early. I'm not gonna dread the commute there, the commute back, if I like it there. I mean, you hear people all the time say, well, I guess I shouldn't say all the time. It's probably about 50-50, maybe 60-40. But uh, there are people that leave their house, they go to work, and they, they'll tell you, I like my job. I like my job. I don't mind the commute. I don't mind the people there. Um, and then you have people at home who are miserable in remote roles. I mean, your I don't want to say yours was a prime example of being miserable, but um, it's just, you know, you did have that slight amount of dread when getting up in the morning, dragging yourself down the steps, as you said, and hopping on and or turning your computer on, and it was pretty rough to see at first because I mean, I guess I should say when you transitioned into like the bigger role, the newer role, that I guess I would, basically jumping up in the org chart essentially. It in my perspective took you away from that, you know, feeling that you're able to help people and put you more in like a management role where it just seemed like oversight and nothing really seemed like direct help, and never gave you that, fulfillment, satisfaction. So we both worked from home. You felt one way about the role, and I felt the opposite way about my role. And it made me feel silly sometimes, if there was something stressful or something, I not even stressful, like something if I just felt like complaining, I'm like, you know what, she has a way more stressful role than I do, so I'm just gonna enjoy mine.
Well, and I think that was kind of the point. I never felt like I was done working.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what made it hard in the morning sometimes because sleeping was my only time that I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about it or engaged in it. And, it's where it became very clear my inability to hold work life boundaries because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get away from my desk to go for a walk. I ate at my desk. Two to three meals, depending on how
Sometimes you didn't
long.
even finish your food.
Right. How long I worked. I had, 10 to 20 literal meetings a day,
Mm-hmm.
all over, team videos. And I would get recharged when I would physically be out at locations. And I'd come back and I'd be like, all right, I'm ready to go. I'm going to make change. And then, you get caught up in the corporate meeting life again. And then it's, because of this system we have with IMs and teams and all that kind of stuff, and everyone can get you all the time, and then you have a work phone, and then, I mean, I think, and maybe I'm overestimating, it was probably 60 to 70 hours a week from the end of January until probably end of May,
I'd say that's accurate.
between kind of everything happening and the fact that, the news likes to hit us with things at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and then I'm having to
Mm-hmm.
answer things. So it definitely kind of, it really landed hard there. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was, and it's great because these are all connecting, your job affecting your personal life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think you and I did really well because you were patient with me as I was getting, I hate to say, sadder and sadder and
Mm-hmm.
kind of more hopeless along the way. But my health is the one thing that I think took a massive impact. And the things that helped me with my health, which were traveling with friends or hiking or biking or, being outside in daylight, all of that took a back seat. And so I lost a little bit of the support network that I had. All of that kind of fell down on you at that point. And even to that end, I mean, I remember you going, come on, let's just go for a walk. And I would get like vicious. No, I don't want to do it. And then on top of that, gaining 50 pounds. And now it's harder to do those things. And then I would get frustrated that I'd basically coped by eating and then not moving and being tired. And then I had the cervical arthritis diagnosis. Now I'm stressed that maybe there's surgery. And I remember thinking, I can't afford to have surgery and take that much time off. And then being like, oh, but maybe that's the excuse I need. And that is like, talk about red flag everywhere. To need to have I couldn't even get time to go to a chiropractor, or I wiggle in the MRIs on days off, for holidays or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So definitely impacted the personal life, but I think, and I'll give credit, the patience that you had with that, and I think the trust that there would be a tipping point was really, really helpful. And that'll come in when we kind of talk a little bit about navigating the conversation with each other. But the last two were about the salary not making up for the dissatisfaction, which I think is hysterical because no one works in the federal government for the salary. So for me, it was great pay. Like, don't get me wrong, and it was dependable pay, but it's the benefits. So it's the pension plan. It's all of those things that people usually stick for. And I was in that sweet spot of I hadn't hit 10 years yet. I wasn't looking at retirement anytime really soon. And so none of that mattered to me. And there wasn't going to be enough pay they could actually give me within the realm of what they were allowed. And if anyone's interested, the pay is publicly available. You can always go look at it. That was going to make up for it. Because I also knew, even in this wildly competitive market, if at some point I got a job doing the same work in a general sized organization, I'd be making 2 times more at a minimum than I had been. Now, money's not everything. I'm learning that very quickly, I think, right now, as I'm kind of understanding what brings me happiness again. And that has led me to daydream about what career I'd really want. And so that's, I think, how we'll wrap up this section. And, I think we'll have part two is going to be diving into the you and me and how you actually go through it. But the dreaming of the new kind of career, and it goes back to the very first thing we talked about with passion for what you do, because you are one of the most wildly talented and diverse individuals I think I've ever known in all of your hobbies. So, you look at you and you are a health and safety person. Like, you're the guy that goes out and makes sure, someone's not going to trip and fall, and that the ladders are all stabilized, and the injury reports happen the way they're supposed to happen. And then you find out that you also play World of Warcraft. You pump iron at the gym like a little crazy. You cycle. You I mean, we have every sporting equipment thing in the books downstairs for outdoor stuff. And you play musical instruments, which I find hysterical that I didn't even know that about you for like the first 6 months we were together. It was just a guitar in a closet that I didn't know anything about. You're like, oh yeah, I was in a band, and now you're in a band.
Forgot I did it myself. So.
And you taught yourself drums in the last like 5-6 months, which is insane to me. And but the question being of, would you want any of those things to ever be your job?
Um, and I know I've kind of talked about this before, but I've noticed myself in the past, and I think this is one of the reasons I went about choosing my major the way I did. Um, it's like anytime something I enjoyed became a job or became something I had to do, where it kind of took away, you know, my choice, my freedom with it, it's like I didn't like it anymore. Um, so it's funny, like, and I thought about, and when I mentioned about the college major, it's like, it's almost as if, and I didn't think about this until like 10 years later, but it's almost as if I couldn't choose a major. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do because everything I wanted to set my mind to, I started to dislike it because then I had to do work with it. I had to take tests. I had to do homework. I had to do, you know, get up and do presentations. And I'm like, oh, man, I don't like this. Like, I'd rather do everything the way I want to do it. I don't want somebody else telling me to do this or do that. Or I will say though, I will say that, and I think I mentioned to you before, I tried the whole gaming streaming thing, the World of Warcraft streaming thing. That's a flooded market to say the least. But um, I enjoyed the game. Like I enjoyed playing the games, whatever it is. But I noticed when I started streaming, and you know, I it took my attention away from the game a little bit, and I didn't like it as much. And then I realized I had to be consistent with it. I had to keep doing this. I had to stream this amount per week, whatever it may be. And then I was like, you know what? I hate this. I'm done with it. I'm gonna keep playing the game, but I'm not gonna do the streaming thing. I think that, with music, it's something that would, playing instruments and whatnot. That would be, I think that would be really enjoyable. Um, Again, depending on how much, I guess the word would be autonomy I would have with it. Like I have a pretty substantial amount of autonomy in my job right now, and I think that's one of the things that really helps, really makes me enjoy it a lot more. Even when I first started, it was my very first virtual role, and I had that feeling, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble, and you eventually get used to it, I guess. But um, I would, I'd say there are a very select few things that I enjoy now. I could see doing as a job. I hope that answers.
Well, it does, but it's funny because you hear when you're growing up or picking careers of if you love what you do, it'll never be work,
Hmm.
and it
But
also
if I like something and it turns into work, and then I don't like
right.
it, so it's the opposite. Yeah.
And it also is a premise of, well, then that takes over your life in some way
Hmm.
because then you'd always do it. And I think there are people who embody that and they've done an amazing job with
Yeah.
it in some fashion, but it's really, really hard unless your entire circle around you
Hmm.
is also in that same industry working with you doing those things. We didn't even bring up your cybersecurity degree like that randomly. I'm just
Yeah, I
gonna
haven't
get
used that one yet.
cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And my whole life in so many ways, my professional associations, everything has been revolving around this career,
Hmm.
and I've been very proud of it. It's kind of, I hate to say, a family born thing that I swore I'd never do, and then I ended up doing it anyway, and I'm good at it. And you would mention a couple of times like, why don't you start your own athletic wear line, because I could never find anything that worked really well, or I liked the culture of the company or anything. And I was like, heck no, I just want to wear the stuff, I don't want to design it. Or I want to give people ideas and let them run with it. And I think that's where I've really struggled. And ideally in my mind, I would love to be in a think tank one day where you talk about stuff and
Hmm.
you give the really good ideas and other people potentially operationalize. But the moment that comes out of my mouth, I go, I'm also the person that says I can still do it better than you, so please don't touch it, like just let me do it. So it's this whole weird inner dynamic, and I don't know if I want to go back into the same industry that I've been in before, and I don't know if I want to do a 9 to 5 that I will quickly turn into a 7 to 7, because have I really dealt with whatever it is in me that makes me want to do that work? And I think I would really struggle taking a job that is checking the boxes, working the spreadsheet, doing what you have to do and going home, because I don't know if that would give me enough meaning to fulfill me for 40 hours a week, because that's a lot of time to give to something for me that isn't giving back. And so and I bring that up because I think as a lot of people are navigating this space, we know there's a huge job market right now. When the feds cut a lot of contracts, you had a lot of contractors go back into the workforce. We have a ton of federal employees going back into the workforce. We know that a lot of the things coming up with the budget that just went through will probably put people back into the workforce in some fashion, or they're going to create new jobs that maybe people aren't really well prepared for or anything like that. So it's like this realm of new possibilities, but none of us know what those new possibilities are really going to be. We're in this state post kind of the early 2000s of worlds of influencers and YouTube videos and podcasts, and it's not the stereotypical way that people made their income in the past. And I think that's been one of the most eye-opening things for me. And I mention it to you a lot when I'm looking, because we made a deal I would apply to a job every single day, and still keep moving. But some of those are part-time jobs. They're contract jobs to get something up off the ground. They're reviewing curricula. They're taking a look at freelance type of things. And because those are so unreliable from a long-term standpoint, I think it was ingrained in people our age, late 30s, 40s. You didn't do that because you needed to have your income, because houses don't cost what they did when our parents were buying houses. They life is more expensive now, and we came out into a generation where you still went to college and you got the degree and you may have just finished paying off your student loans. So it's all of these, and I think that's where, back to the very beginning of all of those variables and those pressures. And when I just look at everything in my life that changed in the last couple of years, marrying you, moving to a new town, buying a house, getting involved in some new volunteer work, needing to prioritize my health because it tanked so badly, learning that it wasn't always easy to keep your friendships together because when you're distance, that is an impact. Your priorities really start to change, and realizing that the constant goal of I've got to pay everything off and we've got to have X number of dollars in the bank, and then all of a sudden you're going to be 65 and you're going to be going, oh, I need a knee replacement before I go hike that mountain that we wanted to look at. Like it's that thought process of you can't take it with you when you go. And I think kind of in the very end, as we wrap the episode up, one of the things that we'll talk a lot about on this podcast is what I've gone through with losing my dad, who was in the same industry, and he died at 52. And I'm all of a sudden going, that's 12 years away for me. Like, if I only have 12 years, do I want to spend those 12 years, bless him, like he did, working, day in, day out, stressing, ultimately probably contributing to, what led to his death. Like, those things, I think, bring a component of every day is something that we have to make the most of. And sometimes I'm jealous of the way you can look at it, which is I'm going to do my 9 to 5 and then I'm going to go play some drums. And when I'm done, I'm going to cook a really good meal and we're going to watch something stupid on TV, and then I'm going to play World of Warcraft before I go to bed. And in my world, I was just like, will I actually be able to sign off at 7 p.m.? And who's going to call me at 9 o'clock at night? And how long will that call take? And when can I actually get to bed? So I couldn't get excited for anything else. And I think that was a catalyst, that seeing you live your life the way you did and providing that as a role model. And I can never be that. Let's just be honest. I will never be to the extent that you are and what you do, but I can find my own version of it. And so when you chime back in for part 2 of this, Josh and I will get into how we've had those conversations in a way that hasn't led to animosity and anger, because I think it can be really easy in a world like this to let fear take the reins. And when you're already in your own fear and the fear of the other person starts to come into play, it just feeds off of each other. And so it takes a lot of kind of inner reflection, because I had enough fear for both of us. And I kept thinking, oh my God, Josh is going to get like anxious about this. And oh my God, I don't want him to have to go through those things. And then even me looking back, I was always in the other position. I was you. I was the person that I was like, I'm good. I got my job. And I'm watching my partner that I'm with at that time from age like 18, by the way. I mean, we're talking all the way back to like someone working in a grocery store and me going, why do you need to find a new job? You're good. You stock shelves. You make $10 an hour. What? And just really questioning them and being like, why do you have to change? And not thinking about all of these other things that come into play. And it makes me sad. I mean, I could have done way better. I sucked at this. So now being forced to be on that side of, and me applying my own thought process and being like, Josh probably thinks, why the heck is she leaving a job that she could have had a pension in? Or why is she leaving this job that, assures we have enough to live very comfortably and do the things that we want? And the fact that none of those were top concerns, that your top concern was, are you happy? And will you continue to be happy? I think just pivoted that whole thing. So we'll talk about that. That'll get into the article from Carrie Kirpin, and I think that'll really help. So if this resonated with anyone listening and you're starting to now think about, okay, what does that mean for where I'm at in my career? Or am I triggering on some of those things? And now you're like, okay, well, how do I talk to anyone about it? Any of these can be applied to friends, family, loved ones, mentors, whole way across the board. So I think it'll be a really good follow up to this conversation. And I'm really interested in how the heck Josh managed to not be visibly afraid of what was coming down kind of the pipe at him. So thanks for tuning in. Again, the article we looked at today and we talked about was by Shayna Joubert from Northeastern University. I will make sure to link it in the summary of the episode, and we will see you again real soon, guys. Thanks for tuning in.